So I want you to imagine you're sitting in this freezing cold room. I
Yeah.
mean, you're huddled up in a chair, you're shivering, your teeth are chattering. You are just absolutely miserable.
Oh, yeah. The worst feeling.
Right. So to fix this, you go out and you buy a massive industrial-grade space heater. You drag it into the middle of the room, you crank the dial all the way up to 90 degrees, and you pull your chair, like, right up to the grill.
Which, for the first few minutes, that intense blast of heat probably feels like a lifesaver.
It does. But then, very quickly, the reality sets in. Your shins are burning, you're sweating profusely through the front of your shirt, but the back of your neck is still freezing cold.
Right, because you haven't actually changed the room.
Exactly. Your electric meter is just spinning out of control, you're drained from the massive temperature fluctuation, and, well, you're burning an incredible amount of energy without solving the root problem. Because the window right behind you is still wide open. You're basically trying to fight the environment instead of just fixing it.
Yeah, you're treating a structural problem with brute force, which is, honestly, it's the most common and the most exhausting way people try to handle stress.
It really is. And welcome to today's deep dive, where we're unpacking exactly why we do this to ourselves psychologically and the incredibly simple physics of how to stop. Today, we're pulling our insights from transcripts and summaries of a really fascinating Japanese audio project called Connect Log.
Yeah, and the mission behind Connect Log is just brilliant. They don't just, review a single book and give you a bulleted summary.
Right. No boring book reports here.
Exactly. They take isolated pieces of knowledge from completely different fields like psychology, engineering, business, and they connect them into this network of highly practical wisdom. And it's specifically tailored for the modern corporate worker, the salaryman in Japan.
And these are people dealing with high-pressure environments, grueling commutes, really intense corporate hierarchies.
Yeah, so they need solutions that actually make the daily grind easier to navigate, but without requiring them to completely, overhaul their entire lives.
Right, exactly. And the connection we're exploring today starts with a book on human psychology. But the Japanese hosts somehow managed to link it to the thermodynamics of air conditioning systems.
Which is wild, right?
So wild.
Yeah.
And to the cognitive behavior of startup founders, and even the unwritten social contract of crowded commuter trains. So the goal here is to give you a really efficient, low-energy framework for handling the friction in your own life.
So we begin with this book by a psychiatrist named Hideki Wada, and the title translates roughly to The Science of Bright People Who Somehow Succeed in Life.
Now, when we hear the phrase bright person in the West, or, well, even when the hosts discussed it in Japan, a very specific, almost aggressive image comes to mind, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. We tend to think of brightness as an output, like this blinding, radiant light we have to actively generate all the time.
Yeah, and the Japanese actually have a playful slang term for this. They call it the peripi. Yeah, it's short for party person. It's that hyper-energetic, overwhelmingly positive individual who just seems, I don't know, completely impervious to a bad day.
Right, the person who's always at a level 10.
Exactly. Yeah. And the immediate reaction most people have when they're told to be a bright person is just sheer exhaustion.
Yeah.
Like if you're naturally introverted or if you're just dealing with a heavy workload, trying to manufacture that peripi energy feels impossible.
It's exactly like your space heater analogy. You're basically telling someone sitting in a freezing room to just mentally generate their own body heat until they feel warm. It's totally unsustainable.
Right.
But Wada's research dismantles that misconception entirely. Being bright in a functional, sustainable way has nothing to do with manufacturing this artificially high euphoric personality.
Okay, and what is it?
It's actually about systematically reducing your internal friction so that taking any action just feels light. It's about preserving your baseline energy. You're not adding a turbocharger to an engine that's already running out of gas.
Wow, okay. And one of the Connect Log hosts shared this personal story that really captures the physical reality of this. He was running the Tokyo Marathon.
Oh, man. That's a serious run.
Yeah, and anyone who's run a long distance knows about that moment. Your body simply shuts down. Near the end of the race, right around Tokyo Tower, he said he hit that wall. His physical HP, his health points, like the actual capacity of his muscles, was at absolute zero.
Right, he was just completely depleted.
Completely. So he was relying entirely on mental MP, or magic points.
Like in role-playing games.
Exactly like games.
Yeah.
When a character's physical body is battered, they dip into this separate finite reserve of magical energy to cast spells or just keep moving.
Yeah.
He was basically treating his raw willpower as a secondary battery.
Just forcing himself forward.
Yeah, his body was moving like an automated zombie. The Tokyo Marathon has these massive, dense crowds cheering along the final stretch. And he noticed something crazy. When the crowd cheered for him, even though he was in excruciating agony, if he forced himself to smile and wave back at them, he experienced a tangible shift.
Wait, really? Just from smiling?
Yeah, he quantified it as a literal 5% physical battery recharge. Every single time he executed the mechanical action of smiling and waving, he got just enough life force back to take the next few steps.
Okay, and I'm sure listeners are thinking this too, let me push back on that a bit. Because translating a marathon to an office environment brings up a major red flag.
How so?
Well, if you're dealing with a toxic work culture or you're deeply overwhelmed, telling someone to just force a smile sounds like the textbook definition of toxic positivity.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean.
Like, we spend so much time now telling people not to mask their true feelings, pretending everything is fine when it isn't. That's just a recipe for severe burnout.
That is such a fair point, and actually the ConnectLog hosts grappled with that exact tension. But the distinction here is really crucial. Wada isn't advocating for masking complex emotional trauma or, pretending a toxic environment is healthy. This isn't long-term emotional strategy at all.
Okay, so what is it then?
It's an immediate, localized biological hack, like a mechanical lever for your endocrine system.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, when you physically contract the zygomatic major muscles in your face to form a smile, you're sending a structural signal to your brain. Your brain responds to that muscle contraction by releasing dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins while simultaneously lowering your cortisol levels.
Okay, so it's literal biochemistry.
Exactly. Think about your smartphone when it's on 1% battery and the screen is dimming. Plugging it in for 3 minutes to get a quick 5% charge doesn't repair a degraded battery, right?
Right, and it doesn't fix a broken charging port.
Exactly. But it gives you exactly enough juice to make one vital phone call. The runner wasn't fundamentally changing his emotional state. He was just using a physiological trigger to secure a temporary, pragmatic energy boost.
Okay, that makes so much sense. It's deploying a tool when you're out of gas,
Yeah.
rather than trying to permanently rewrite your personality to be this happy-go-lucky parapy.
Spot on. And that pragmatic approach to energy preservation, that is exactly where this deep dive takes a massive pivot, because the Japanese hosts move from the biochemistry of a smile right into the thermodynamics of an apartment building.
Oh, the air conditioning epiphany. This was my favorite part of their discussion.
Right. Tell them about the professor.
So one of the hosts recalled this profound lesson from a college professor who taught courses on HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems.
Sounds thrilling.
Right. But the professor stood in front of the class and delivered this rule that totally defies our intuitive understanding of temperature control. He said, when you are dealing with a freezing room, heating is not about adding heat. It is about removing the cold.
Which brings us directly back to the space heater burning our shins.
Exactly. From a physics standpoint, if you pump immense heat into a room that has a massive draft, you're not just wasting energy, you're actually accelerating the problem.
Wait, how does it accelerate?
Well, the extreme heat creates a convection current that pulls the freezing outside air through the draft even faster. You are actively fighting the environment and making the draft worse.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Yeah. And the host actually applied this to his own life. He moved into this drafty new apartment in Tokyo, right in the middle of winter, and he was absolutely freezing. His initial instinct was, naturally, to go buy the biggest electric heater he could find.
The space heater approach.
Exactly. But then he remembered the professor's rule. He realized he didn't need to generate heat. He needed to find the leak.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So he walks around his apartment, tracing the perimeter, and finds the exact window frame that was leaking the winter air. He walks to a 100-yen shop, buys a cheap roll of plastic bubble wrap, and tapes it right over the specific seal that was failing.
And let me guess, the room naturally returned to a comfortable baseline temperature.
Yep, with zero active energy wasted.
Okay, here is where it gets really interesting when we map this back to workplace dynamics, because this completely dismantles the self-help industry's obsession with endless positivity.
It really does.
Trying to force yourself to become a radiant, unfazed parapie when you're surrounded by stress is the equivalent of buying that industrial space heater. You're reading, like, 10 books on stoic leadership just to tolerate one toxic manager.
Which is such a massive misallocation of your mental resources.
Huge. Because you're assuming the baseline state of your mind is cold and therefore requires constant active fueling to stay warm. But Wada's philosophy suggests the exact opposite. The baseline state of the human mind is comfortable. If you are freezing, it's because there is a specific draft.
So the goal is simply finding your bubble wrap. You don't overhaul your personality. You isolate the friction.
Exactly. If the draft is a coworker who hijacks the morning meeting with complaints every single day, your bubble wrap might just be dialing into the meeting 5 minutes late. Or putting on noise-canceling headphones before they start.
Or if the draft is a Friday afternoon reporting task that gives you severe anxiety all week, your bubble wrap is just creating an automated template on Tuesday so you don't even have to think about it.
Right. You remove the specific source of the darkness, and the brightness naturally returns on its own. You don't have to force yourself to be happy. You just stop the leak.
That is an incredibly forgiving framework. It really gives you permission to just be normal. But I feel like there's a natural trap here.
What do you mean?
Let's say you've insulated your mental apartment, your drafts are sealed, you've got this comfortable baseline of energy. You still have to step outside eventually, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
You still have to execute projects, make difficult decisions, and take risks in your career. How do you actually take action without immediately blowing through that preserved energy you just saved up?
Okay. To answer that, the Connect Log hosts cross-reference this low-energy philosophy with a specialized field of business research called effectuation.
Effectuation,
Yeah.
which I have to admit sounds like a terrible corporate buzzword.
It totally does, but the actual mechanics of it are fascinating. It's the academic study of how highly successful serial entrepreneurs make decisions in chaotic environments.
Okay, and we've all been fed a deeply romanticized myth about startup founders, right? Like the whole Silicon Valley narrative tells us these are fearless mavericks taking massive blind leaps of faith.
Oh, yeah. We picture them mortgaging their homes, maxing out their credit cards, and just betting everything on a single disruptive idea.
But the data in effectuation proves they actually don't operate that way at all. They're practically allergic to unmitigated risk.
Ah.
Yeah. Instead of aiming for a guaranteed massive return, they base their decisions on a strict cognitive framework called acceptable loss.
Okay, let's unpack that. What is acceptable loss?
Well, the human brain is hardwired to panic in the face of ambiguity. When an outcome is entirely unknown, the amygdala, the fear center of the brain, treats that uncertainty as an existential life or death threat. It completely paralyzes you.
Right, fight or flight.
Exactly. But what serial entrepreneurs do is bypass the amygdala by mathematically defining the absolute worst-case scenario before they ever take a step. They convert an existential terror into a simple math problem.
Okay, let's ground this for someone not launching a startup. Imagine you're making a terrifying B2B cold call. You're paralyzed because you want a 100% win rate, right?
Sure, you don't want to get rejected.
But what is your acceptable loss?
Mm.
If you sit down and define the floor, the worst-case scenario is just someone saying no and hanging up the phone.
Which is completely survivable.
Exactly. You can survive a hang-up. You aren't going to be fired. You aren't going to go bankrupt. Your acceptable loss is just 10 seconds of mild professional rejection. Once your prefrontal cortex rationalizes that the absolute worst-case scenario is entirely survivable, the biological fear response just evaporates. You just pick up the phone.
And one of the Japanese hosts actually used this exact acceptable loss framework to execute a massive life pivot.
Oh, right. Career change.
Yeah. He had been paralyzed for years by the fear of quitting his stable corporate job. The ambiguity of the career change was triggering that amygdala hijack.
But then he defined the floor.
Exactly. When he finally sat down and calculated his acceptable loss, he realized the floor was simply getting another, perhaps slightly lower-paying, corporate job if the new path failed. He wasn't going to end up starving on the street. By defining the bottom, he basically bubble-wrapped his fear.
I love that. He bubble-wrapped his fear. And this changes the entire mathematical equation of success. Because if you only take actions where the loss is acceptable to you, a failure doesn't wipe you out.
Right, you live to fight another day.
And if a failure doesn't wipe you out, you can afford to take significantly more swings. Which leads the Connect Log hosts directly to the philosophy of Tadashi Yanai.
The founder of Uniqlo, right?
Yes, the billionaire founder of the global retail giant. He wrote a book detailing his business philosophy, and the title is just brutally honest. 1 win, 9 losses.
Wow, 1 win, 9 losses.
Yeah. We look at Uniqlo today and see this unstoppable juggernaut. But Yanni spends the book detailing how Uniqlo's initial attempt to expand globally in the early 2000s was a catastrophic failure. They lost millions, they had to shutter stores, and they had to retreat back to Japan in a highly public defeat.
But because Yanai operated on the principle of acceptable loss, that massive defeat didn't bankrupt the core company.
Exactly. They simply viewed it as finding one specific methodology that did not work. They absorbed the loss, recalibrated, and stepped up to the plate again. It shifts the metric of success away from your batting average and entirely onto your total number of at-bats.
If you strike out 9 times, but your one hit is a grand slam, you still win the game.
You just need to preserve enough energy to keep walking up to the plate. And this is where the Connect log hosts pull all of these disparate threads together, the energy preservation, the acceptable loss, the volume of attempts, into this beautiful metaphor that completely reframes how we experience our careers.
Yeah, they brought in the perspective of Tadashi Yanase. And for listeners unfamiliar with Japanese culture, Yanase is the creator of Anpanman.
Which is huge.
Huge! Anpanman is essentially the Mickey Mouse of Japan, an absolute titan of children's entertainment, a beloved character that has generated billions. But Yanase did not achieve that monumental success until he was in his late 50s.
Late 50s. That's incredible.
Yeah, he spent decades watching younger, brilliant contemporaries achieve massive fame. People like Osamu Tezuka, who is literally known as the god of manga, were skyrocketing to legendary status, while Yanase was struggling in the background, drawing obscure cartoons and feeling entirely left behind.
So how did he not just give up?
Well, when asked how he survived those decades of obscurity without quitting, Yanase offered a profound observation. He said that pursuing a meaningful career is exactly like riding a packed Japanese commuter train.
Oh, I love this analogy so much. It completely dismantles the artificial ticking clock we all carry around. We're constantly told that if we haven't made it to the top by age 30 or 40, we've failed. We view success as a sprint.
But Yanase viewed it as endurance. When you first board that train, it is packed shoulder to shoulder. The geniuses, the prodigies, the people who seem to have life completely figured out, they have already claimed all the seats.
And you're left standing in the aisle, clinging to a strap, getting jostled by the crowd.
Exactly. It's exhausting, it's uncomfortable, and deeply discouraging. And what happens, people get tired. They look around, they see no open seats, they decide they aren't talented enough, and they voluntarily step off the train.
But Yanasi realized that people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they burn through their energy reserves and quit.
Yes. His philosophy was remarkably simple. If you just hold on to the strap and stay on the train, eventually the landscape changes, people reach their stops, the geniuses get off to pursue other things, the prodigies retire, the crowd thins out.
And if you just maintain your position on the train long enough, eventually, as you near the end of the line, a seat will open up for you.
You don't need to be the smartest or the fastest, you just need to outlast the crowd.
That is wow. If you fail at a major project, if you bomb a presentation, or if you get passed over for a promotion, it doesn't mean your career is over. It just means you didn't get a seat yet.
Right. The only way you secure a permanent, irreversible failure is if you voluntarily walk off the train.
So bringing this all back to you, the listener, right now, sitting in your office or commuting home, how do you ensure you have the stamina to stand on that crowded, jostling train for decades? You don't do it by blasting a mental space heater. You don't survive by forcing yourself to be a hyper-positive parapie who smiles joyfully at every single bump and delay. That will burn out your battery before you even reach the third stop.
Exactly. You survive by touching your drafts. You find the $1 bubble wrap to neutralize the specific people and tasks that are draining your heat. You clearly define your acceptable losses so that when you do take a risk and fail, it doesn't trigger an amygdala hijack that forces you to flee the train.
You maintain your baseline temperature. And when your legs are shaking and you absolutely need to reach the next station, you deploy that 5% biological hack of a smile to trick your brain into taking one more step.
It is a profound shift from seeking endless optimization to mastering strategic endurance. You can let yourself off the hook. You don't need to completely rewire your personality to succeed.
Absolutely. So I want to leave you with this final thought. We spent this entire deep dive analyzing how you protect your own energy, how you find your own drafts. But what if we zoom out?
Yeah, look around your life right now, especially if you're a manager, a team leader, or even a parent. What if the freezing cold room is actually the environment you are creating for the people relying on you? Are you demanding that your team members act like hyper-energetic parapets, burning up their engines to prove their dedication? Or are you actively helping them locate their drafts and handing them the bubble wrap? Because the moment you shift from demanding heat to removing the cold, you completely change what true leadership looks like. Before you try to overhaul your entire mindset or your teams, ask yourself, what is the $1 bubble wrap solution you can apply today to stop the draft so everyone can keep riding the train?